It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. On this episode, we're going to be continuing our reverse logistics series on Supply Chain Now Radio, where we conduct this series in partnership with the Reverse Logistics Association. We're going to dive into the fascinating world of reverse logistics, returns, and much more. That's what we've been doing. And today we're featuring a leader from one of the world's most admired companies who are doing some really incredible things in the reverse logistics and sustainability space. So stay tuned for more. Real quick programming note for our listeners, like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels: Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Greg's favorite YouTube, wherever you get your podcast from. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. And real quick thanks to our sponsors, which allow us to bring these best practices and innovative ideas to you, our audience: The Effective Syndicate, ProPurchaser.com, SupplyChainRealEstate.com, TalentStream, many more. You can check out our sponsors on the show notes of this episode. And let's say hello to my esteemed co-host here today, Greg White, successful supply chain technology entrepreneur, trusted advisor, and in case you didn't know, a professional tennis champion. How you doing, Greg?
Amateur tennis.
Amateur.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you.
You got some heavyweight belts that comes with your tennis exploits.
Here in Atlanta, you get dishes.
Oh, okay.
Right? You either get the salad plate or you get the dinner plate. So
okay.
Yeah, you're trying for the dinner plate. Yeah.
Well, glad to have you back. We're
great
fresh
to be here.
off travels to Texas with the EFT Logistics CIO event. And we're going to be continuing the technology discussion in many ways with our two guests here today. As always, we'd love to have Tony Sciarrotta back with us, Executive Director with the Reverse Logistics Association. Tony, how you doing?
We're doing great here.
Great to have you back. We're really enjoying this monthly series.
We were ahead of you in Austin and left it clean and pretty for you.
Right.
Y'all did a great job. We really enjoyed our time there. And also our featured guest here today, Jack Allen, Senior Director, Global Logistics with Cisco. Jack, how you doing?
Good. I'm doing good. How are y'all?
Doing fantastic. And, I should say repeat guest. We had Jack on with us probably about a year and some change ago. And the hits keep on coming at Cisco. We had it was a fascinating story at the time, a lot of things that y'all are involved with, and it just seems like y'all have written a couple new exciting chapters, so we look forward to diving into that today. But welcome back.
Thank you.
Okay, so like we typically do with a lot of our podcasts, Greg, we like to give our audience the opportunity to get to know our featured guests, right?
Yeah.
Now, Tony is unforgettable. However, for a handful of folks
on the planet,
for a handful of folks that may not be familiar with Tony's background, Tony, let's start with you. Let's refresh our listeners' memory and kind of give them a sense of who you are. So tell us about yourself in a nutshell.
In a small nutshell.
That's right. Pecan.
I'm the guy that spent most of his career in sales and marketing and then got thrown into this returns world one day by senior management at Philips, who decided someone had to do something about returns. And so I fell into a niche that I seem to be very passionate about and very kind of good at it.
Really good.
Sometimes by accident, sometimes by intent. And I finally discovered that this Reverse Logistics Association is a very important part of our ecosystem, and I've had the honor to serve as the executive director and help guide it into a new revitalized organization around the world. And I'm proud to say we have been around the world this year. We've been between Las Vegas and then Amsterdam and then Singapore. We've traveled the world, and it's been great.
In demand. best practices on all things reverse logistics are in demand globally, right?
I guess they want to look at the dark side once in a while.
Well, kidding aside, I think clearly we've seen your passion on each of these installments. We've collaborated in other ways. We've seen your expertise, but I think when you talk about building and leading the growth of an organization, that requires lots of leadership expertise and bandwidth as well. And clearly from the first time we met almost 2 years ago now to where the RLA is now, man, it's night and day. So kudos on that continued growth.
Well, and it's really more than just an organization. I mean, it's really an initiative, an industry, if you will. I mean,
it is.
We talk about this a lot of times when when we mention the RLA, because we do have an event coming up next year, right, in Vegas
February.
again,
we do.
right? So, one of the things that as a practitioner, former retail practitioner, one of the things that I think really ignites my passion around this topic is the fact that Tony and his organization not only want to receive and handle returns, but to do those things that help preempt or eliminate returns. And I think that's one of the things that was most resounding in the first time that we talked, Tony, was the preemptive strike, if you will, to try and do those things that make it easier for the consumers to understand what they're getting and not default to returning it.
You're referring to the war between the engineers and myself that went on for way too long, and I was glad to say I won because it was all about that customer experience. The engineers who said, no, we make good product, it doesn't break. And they're right, it doesn't break. They just didn't make it easy enough for people to use.
Right.
So there's been a real shift in the ecosystem. Net Promoter Score and all those great things have really changed the world, and so has Amazon, which, by the way, I get to put in a plug that Amazon is now a board member of the Reverse Logistics Association.
Outstanding.
And mention that I'm not the smartest guy in the room these days. I am honored and very proud to have very smart people on my advisory board, including Amazon, Dell, HP, and of course, Jack from Cisco.
Well, on that note, and we're fortunate to have Jack back with us. The last conversation we had here was very well received. Got a lot of feedback on that. And Jack, appreciate what you do out in the industry too. I mean, as busy as you are, we talked about this over lunch. You're on a plane, you've got a family, 3 hours of sleep each night, but then to also give up some of your time to, serve on these advisory boards like what the great work RLA is doing. We really appreciate that. So let's dive into who Jack Allen is. So tell us some more about yourself. We're starting maybe where you're from.
Yeah, so I was born in Michigan, grew up in Ohio. I've been moving south ever since, and someday I'll probably end up on the equator, right, because I like warm weather. But right now I've been in Atlanta, Georgia for about 35 years, maybe. So, yeah.
You get your native badge at 20, I hear, these days. So
really?
You're about to double up on that.
Right.
Well, I got to tell you this, and I probably shouldn't name names, but I asked my brother-in-law, who actually is a native Georgian, one year, when I would be a Southerner. I've been in the South since I was 18. And he said, never. You will never be a Southerner.
Where's your brother-in-law from? What part of Georgia? Do you remember?
I believe he is from Albany, Georgia.
Albany, yes. That's legit.
Albany.
That is
And
legit.
if he's listening, I'm probably already in trouble.
They don't even consider people from Atlanta Southerners.
All right, so let's talk about the time. Claude, you've been here almost 35 years. Kind of your professional journey leading up to your role now, where you're the leader in global logistics. Talk more about that journey.
Yeah. Do you want the the sanitized version, or do you want the fun version?
Give us the fun version.
Yeah.
I was afraid you were going to say that. Yeah, so my first degree is actually in marine biology. I cut up a lot of sharks when I was in school. I was on a National Science Foundation grant. I did a lot of marine biology things, and so I went to work in the Bahamas for a small nonprofit field station on an island called Andros Island, and again, I probably shouldn't say this in case anyone from Bahamian Immigrations is listening, but I got deported from the Bahamas because I did not have a work permit. True story.
Illegal alien.
They were,
illegal alien.
I was illegal. Yeah, from the Bahamas.
But what a great place.
Yeah, that's right. So they were going to put me in prison when our plane landed in Nassau, and I talked them out of that, which was great. But I had to find something to do, so I went to North Carolina to, wait till the work permit came through, and I ended up doing work as a jeweler. And then I started a manufacturing company that actually built rings, diamonds and stuff like that for Zales. That was when I learned that I loved manufacturing, but the business was too small, so I sold it to my business partner, moved to Atlanta, and curiously enough, Scott, I know this is hard to believe, but no one wanted to hire a marine biologist jeweler as a manufacturing guy. I mean, it just...
I don't
resume
get it, Jack.
didn't work,
Clearly, no vision.
Yes, exactly. So I started going to Georgia Tech so that I could reinvent myself, and I ended up working for a company called Scientific Atlanta, and they made me an offer, and I took it. I ran factories and warehouses, and most of the supply chain kind of jobs. I got in materials because when I was a factory guy, I used to complain about materials all the time. So my boss, gave me materials for my sins. That was how I got into logistics. I got to a point where we were kind of managing the supply chain processes for all the factories around the world. And then we got bought by Cisco. One day I got a phone call saying, hey, I want you to interview for this logistics job. And, I was kind of... been there, done that. I don't feel like I need to do that, but they called me into it. It turned out to be a great job. I mean, it's probably the best job I've ever had in my life. And we've turned that job into not just daily operations, but into a really innovation, cutting edge. Let's change the supply chain. Let's move the industry. We've opened up 2 innovation centers in Houston and in Turkey, Istanbul, Turkey. And now we're working on this circular economy thing, which is really exciting. I have to say it's probably one of the toughest business challenges I've ever faced in my life. It has all kinds of thorny issues, from intellectual property to ownership, to software, to right of repair, to the channel strategy. And so I've learned a lot, and it's really been great. It's been a great experience. Tony and I have been partnering, gosh, since I started in the logistics job, right? Probably 10 years.
About 10 years.
So, so we have a long history.
So you have some stories you aren't going to tell us about over those last 10 years?
Tony's pretty calm. I mean, the pictures that I have of him and
Amsterdam.
Let's just not go there.
Amsterdam, enough said.
Yeah, that's right. All right, so you mentioned circular economy. We're going to dive in deep on that. So we'll hold our thoughts there, because we really want to define that, because I think that one of the challenges with that, the whole CE movement, is maybe a lack of understanding. But we're going to define that in a second. Before that, you and I met when you hosted an executive roundtable for the Apex Atlanta a couple of years ago, which was really well received. That was probably one of the smallest rooms you've ever spoken to, because you give a lot of keynotes at Modex and a lot of other industry events. So here in 2019, I know you spoke at ASCN 2019 in Vegas a few months back, but what else would have been some of your favorite events to speak at or be a part of here in 2019?
Well, Modex always, which wasn't this year, is such a great event, and I'm thrilled that Atlanta is considered, supply chain city enough for Modex to be here. Those people are great, so it's always one of my best places to go and places to speak. This year I've been doing a lot of speaking on not only the digital disruption that's happening in supply chain, so that's a very hot topic, but also circular economy, right? So I've given 2 or 3 speeches on circular economy this year. It's funny, I feel like we start to see trends in the industry a couple of years early, and then suddenly 2 years later, everybody's going after it, right? So I feel like circular economy, when we got started, was one of those leading edge, and now you really hear a lot about it. So it's gaining momentum. People realize there's a lot of value there, and I'm doing a lot of speaking on that topic.
All right, so let's talk about, and backing up real quick, Modex, great people running MedX. We had a chance to be up in Charlotte a few weeks ago and sit down with some members of their leadership team, including George Prest, that's been leading the organization for quite some time. And he spent 30 years as an entrepreneur prior to that, and just as approachable. I mean, despite all the accomplishments he's made, just as nice and as visionary as folks come. You're going to...
Yeah, one thing forgive me, my team would kick my tail if I forgot this, but one of the favorites was we actually won the Next Generation Supply Chain Award for Digital Disruption this year. So that speech was, thrilling, not only because I got to talk about my favorite thing, digital disruption, but because we won an award, right? So I wanted to work that in. Big accomplishment. Thank you, Scott.
That's important. Elena Parsons and the whole team up there that make that conference happen. That is an A+ conference, and looking forward to seeing what y'all might be recognized with in 2020.
That's right.
Okay, so let's talk about the circular economy. That's the 10,000 million pound gorilla in the room, and that's what a lot of companies are trying to figure out how to address and make progress in a meaningful fashion, not just talk about it in lip service. So let's start. I want to get Tony and Jack both to weigh in. Let's define what we mean by circular economy first. And Tony, we're going to start with you.
Well, the nice thing about this new term, circular economy, being a buzzword, and it truly is, and it's a good buzzword, is that it's more encompassing than being a returns guy or reverse logistics guy. That now is the cornerstone of what happens. But circular economy is all about things like we're going to run out of resources. We know some point we will run out of resources. Right. So is it better to figure out how to reuse what we're doing and what we've got and design it to be reused and so on? And that way, reverse logistics now becomes pivotal in that chain of bring it back, do something else with it, and don't just throw it away. And that's an awesome statement. It's an awesome responsibility. I take it way too serious sometimes, but it's actually very cool, very important. And the opportunity to think circular versus linear is mind-changing. It's a paradigm shift in the world, and we really love being a part of it and being such an integral part of it.
It is. It's intentional from concept through design all the way through use and reuse.
Yep.
Right. That's not a perspective that we've had in the past. So it's a big shift.
Yep. All right, so Jack, same question to you. Kind of let's define, what does that circular economy mean to you?
Yeah, so let's start with a big idea. And, honestly, I think that this goes back, 100,000 years, right? Prehistoric times. Think about the old economy when you took something out of the ground, let's say bronze, right? You smelt it down, you turn it into an arrowhead. And the linear economy says, hey, arrowhead's getting old, it's not pretty anymore, I'm going to throw it away, I'm going to get some more stuff out of the ground, I'm going to build another one, et cetera. Now, it is a fact that we have been recycling metals and stuff like that for a long time, but the concept behind circular economy is you start to think of everything as not take it out of the ground, use it, throw it away, but take it out of the ground, use it, figure out a new use for it, change it into something else, use it again, maybe even sell it again, and that's the base concept. Now, I'm going to pull out my prop here, which the guys on the podcast can't see, but this is an iPhone 8, right? If you're listening, this is an iPhone 8. Two concepts. I really didn't get the business value for circular economy until I hired this guy from a telco. His name's Rich Bulger. And imagine that you want to buy not the 8, but the 10, the $1,000 phone, and you're like, hey, I just can't bring myself to pay $1,000 for a gosh darn phone. I mean, so now I come to you, Greg, and I say, hey, give me your old phone. I'm making up these numbers, but I'll give you $200 for your old phone. Now your new phone is only $800, right? Because you got this old phone discount. Great. I take your old phone and I'm going to sell it for $250. Now I made $50. Now I layer on software and services, and now I've got a recurring revenue stream on that old phone that you thought was garbage, and now I'm making money. Suddenly you start to see how companies can make money. And when we talk about the planet, I only found this out the other day. I should have known, but do you know how they get gold out of the ground? They take like a ton of rock, and in some cases they pour cyanide on the stuff, right, which goes into the ground. They get the gold. They have a bunch of cyanide, a ton of rock. There is as much gold in 42 of these iPhones as there is in a ton of rock. So if you start to think of things we throw away not as waste, but as a great feedstock for a new kind of mining industry, now you can see the whole circularity thing really starts to make a lot of sense, right?
Tailings, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of, Netflix, I love the series called Mars, right? And Mars, their second season just came out. And what's really interesting to see some of these elements you're speaking of, the core plot of season 2 is where you've got this international NASA, but a global NASA consortium that hit Mars first and started colonizing it and science driven and this, that, and the other. Well, in season 2, they continue that mission, but the for-profit mining company arrives as well. And now I've only watched, I'm not going to offer any spoilers, I only watched the first episode, but you can start to see the competing forces between these two different worldviews. However, what I heard you say in that example is how it doesn't have to be an us versus them.
Right.
If you plan and collaborate and have the right conversations in a well-intentioned manner, everyone can win while minimizing waste and not getting in the way of technology or all these things that we want. Just doing it in a smarter, friendlier, especially earth-friendlier way, right?
Yep, exactly.
Well, and Jack picked a good example with Apple. When I was in Austin a couple weeks ago, Apple is expanding their campus there. That is their supply chain logistics hub of the world, of the Americas, in Austin. And their stated purpose in hiring more and building more buildings is to take back 100% of the old phones. That's their goal. And Jack nicely pointed out that there's a little bit of gold involved there, too, and there's value in that. So it's not completely altruistic, but it is altruistic in the sense that they want the old phones back, and that's the part of their responsibility to the circular economy. So that's their stated goal. We want all old iPhones back.
Love that. We're going to have someone from Apple. I've rubbed elbows through the years with varying folks involved with Apple's, especially their distribution side. We'll have to have someone on. We should have, while we were in Austin, Greg, we should have rode down the road and gotten a quick interview. I had no idea that was their big hub. Yeah. Speaking of returns, Jack, let's talk about, one of the things we want to dive into next is kind of holistically Cisco's approach to the circular economy, and returns is at the top of the list. So speak to that a little bit as in terms of how Cisco approaches returns with CE in mind.
Yeah, sure. And Cisco has had a long history of doing a good job with returns. There was a guy named Dan Gilbert who roughly 10, 12 years ago started to see that, hey, a lot of this stuff was more valuable than the corporation gave it credit for. We've been recycling ever since then, and we recycle about 99.5% of everything that we do, right, including our contract manufacturers. But when you think about returns, we weren't doing a great job of getting the highest and best use of those returns. So recycling's great, but it's kind of one step above a landfill. You really want to be able to repurpose that gear and reuse that gear. If you think about Cisco as kind of a Mercedes, right? It's a privilege to own Cisco. It's an expensive privilege. If we can take those returns, refurb them, clean the data off so our customers are secure in the knowledge that they don't have to worry about their data going out, right? And we clean it from malware, and we put new software on it, and now we can sell it at a reduced price. We've suddenly created a whole other market for Cisco product, people who couldn't afford it before, right? Now we've expanded our market. This may be super crazy, but I actually could see a world where technology that we take for granted but is inaccessible for a lot of the world because of the price point now suddenly becomes accessible and available to even very low-tech villages in India or China or any other country. We know that it works because we've seen it work with phones in countries like Aruba. Right? We can do this, and we can give the rest of the world the benefit of the things that we take for granted in America. So that's kind of our approach.
So let's talk refurbishment, and you've already touched on that a little bit more. I think it's so important. There's so much that we, let's pick on the 80s for a minute, right? All the stuff we throw out, the one-use stuff, and it goes straight to the landfills. If there's been anything that, I think I'm wearing, we've talked about this before, I think I'm wearing a refurbished watch. I think some of our equipment is refurbished. That seems to be one mindset shift that has been successful, especially from an entrepreneurial standpoint, right? Because the price points are different. But does that's seemingly stuck when it comes to refurbishment, right? Are you all seeing the same thing in your corners of the world?
Well, there's the new concept that Jack was referring to. It's a Mercedes, and now it's a certified pre-owned Mercedes.
Right.
And that terminology is starting to slowly come over to the refurb world. Rather than call it refurb, you're calling it renewed. And by the way, Amazon's leading the world on that too. They've got that whole new category of goods called Amazon Renewed. It's a global business unit. They've invited me to participate in some of their conferences. They're for their team, but they are really focused on that standard of excellence with the renewed goods as well, and establishing what has been common in the auto industry. And in the auto industry, as Jack's referring to, now you're able to get a Mercedes or get a Cadillac at a significantly great value, and you're being confirmed that it's been through significant testing. Now, is it 100 points testing? Who knows if it's really true or not. But at least they're putting that terminology on there, so they're going to have to stand behind it more so than the typical used car lot.
And that's the key, right? Yep. The standing behind it is what gives the consumer the confidence to actually do it.
Right.
I only buy CPO cars, as a matter of fact. So,
Certified pre-owned.
Yep. Sorry.
Yeah, we love our acronyms.
New acronyms.
Yeah. Sorry.
Did you say Amazon Renewed? Is that
Amazon Renewed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And that's been around for a little while, but they're still kind of, if I heard you right, filling out their way in terms of how the masses might buy into it more. Is that fair?
Correct. They used to have warehouse deals and these out-of-box websites on their marketplace companies. They're trying to steer away from that and make everyone become a renewed partner. And you sign an agreement that you will live up to certain standards of the quality of the product, but also, to Greg's point, that you'll take care of the customer. You'll stand behind it completely. And now, Jack and I will get into the discussion maybe a little bit about the fact that you do really have to protect people on this stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
We have no idea of how much data is available on these electronics gears. We've talked about that a little bit before, that IoT experience and so on. But boy, protecting that and making sure nothing's on there, because somebody somewhere is going to get a phone one day or get a computer or get a server that didn't get cleaned. And the world's going to hear about it. And it'll be as big as Equifax's nightmare and so on.
Yeah.
So what you're referring to is if someone bought a used phone and when the seller turned it in or sold it, they didn't use the wipe feature, right? So
correct.
Beyond. I mean,
yes, beyond.
Wipe features, as I think our previous guest would probably attest to, is probably not sufficient to clear the device, right? So you wind up with the president of Lithuania's cell phone.
I thought you were going to say Ukraine. I'm glad you picked Lithuania.
I've already got the president of Ukraine's cell phone, actually. So if you need anything, let me know. But you wind up with a device like that. You could compromise the security of an entire nation, right?
Correct.
And that's the story that's going to break.
Well, and I'll give you a great example because I am acquainted with your previous guest, the cybersecurity person. I was at a conference, and there was a guy, not Ukrainian, German guy, and he was actually talking about Roombas, and he said that it's really incredibly difficult to completely wipe because the memory modules want to continually store blocks, so they've got redundancy if one of those memory blocks gets corrupted. And he said, hey, I've taken this old Roomba, it's supposed to have been wiped, and I can show you the previous owner's house map based on the Roomba.
Wow.
Well, that is pretty scary.
Yeah,
and then you think about something like a phone with pictures of your kids and your credit card information and all that.
or pictures you don't want the general public to see.
Right.
Yeah, we were going to talk about that.
No, cat pictures is what we're talking about.
So for the
Cat's playing the piano is what he's talking about.
So for the non-technologists in the room, such as myself, what do we call? What is that extra step beyond wiping? What is it about breaking the linkages between the phone and the cloud data? So
there's a technical term. There's a standard NIST 8800 or 880. I always get those two backwards. But we always call it purge or wipe, and there are different kinds of cleansing. What some companies used to do, which we're trying to talk them out of, this is still big with the banks, is they would physically destroy the hard drives, physically destroy the boards, drill holes through the boards. Well, obviously that makes the circular value of that product completely go away. So we want to stop that, but we want to make sure our clients feel completely secure that their data is 1,000% protected. Yeah. Right? And that's hard to do.
And unfortunately, there's no standards for this that are recognized by consumers at all. A consumer buys a used product thinking it's been cleaned, it's been cleared, or they give their old product in and they believe it's cleaned or wiped or cleared. But the standards don't exist very well. Now, one of the standards, for example, is the Siri R2 standard. That's a good one. It's not perfect, but it's a good one. But who knows what R2 is?
Right.
And unfortunately, the R2 standard and others are done for the facility where products pass through. So this computer in my hands or the phone in your hands, Scott, may not have gone through an R2 site, or it may have, but it's not that particular product that's confirmed. It's this facility that supposedly adheres to these standards. But again, this is a very new world that we're talking about.
Yeah, I'm scared to share what model of iPhone I have with Tony and Jack here. But I've got the newest one. And the only reason I've got the newest one is because I went from an iPhone 6 to the latest.
You basically doubled.
Yeah.
Almost doubled.
My 6, and being in the digital media business, it's not good to run out of space and have really old technology for bad pictures. So that's we look for some refurb purchases, but just put myself out there. I believe in what the CE. Don't pay attention to what I'm purchasing here. All right. So
Tanya already has all of your information.
Yeah, she's got all your information.
Yeah, our previous guest.
And those pictures that you were afraid of, those will be.
Oh man! All right,
they're being actually.
Oh look!
Yes,
Scott, I didn't know you were that flexible.
All right.
Actually, Malcolm has already found him on LinkedIn.
Boy.
So
I have to pay Malcolm off. All right. So beyond, I want to dive into design for CE. But before I do, I want to make sure we're not leaving any other interesting things to share from a returns, a refurb, and a reselling standpoint. Anything else is important, I think, for our listeners to know?
Well, one thing I would say is in this whole fear thing about the data, et cetera, there's also opportunity. So often there is in the bad things, there's opportunity. And the opportunity for companies like Cisco or Apple or whoever is if a customer is going to buy your used product off the gray market and they don't know what they're getting, and you can go to them with that certified pre-owned concept and say, hey, we know it's clean. We know it has no malware backdoors installed. We know the provenance. You talked a lot about provenance, Greg.
Right.
We know the provenance from start to finish. If you're a board member of that company, what are you going to want them to buy? You want your risk to go away. You want them to buy the certified pre-owned, the CPO, right? That's a big opportunity for companies if they'll seize it.
And the other opportunity in a company like Jack's, from even the manufacturing side and the remanufacturing, is that you know the mistakes that were made the first time.
Right.
And you can correct them.
That's right.
You can correct them. You know the mistakes that maybe were made in the instruction books. You can put a new, simpler guide. And packaging, you have a lot of flexibility in that secondary market to make a more efficient package. You're not as concerned with marketing and putting all kinds of color photos on the box because you're focused on a secondary value add market. So you've got the opportunity to make some things different that didn't happen on the first side. And that's that's a flexibility that you got is you're almost creating a new product marketing concept from a previously released product. So there's some cool things you can do.
Yep.
Yeah. Well put.
That improvement on the original product. I mean, when you buy a certified pre-owned vehicle, you get an additional warranty.
Right.
Right. And and you get a 370-point certification if it's a BMW that
Is
verifies.
it really 370 points?
Yeah, that verifies that they've been through the vehicle. I mean, a for instance is, and it wouldn't be dissimilar if you were talking about a device. The vehicle can't have ever been in any accident.
Yep.
And they verify that. It can't have ever had a theft or any sort of alteration to the permanent record, the VIN number or anything like that. You can do it. You can and will do a similar thing with a device or whatever else might get recertified.
Greg,
right? And
you're on the edge there of bringing that word up that must be mentioned at every conference on the planet. You're at the edge of suggesting a blockchain is needed to keep track of all those things. I just want to go ahead and give it to you.
Well, I really believe, I mean, look, I'm a technologist. I'm not. I don't have a blockchain technology or anything, but I really believe that inalterable record, right?
Yep.
That inalterable record is a very important part of being able to do that. Yeah.
Great.
Actually, I hadn't thought of it until you said something, but yeah,
and let's let the people know that Jack and I are talking about some of the high-tech companies, but it's going past high-tech now, right?
Yeah.
IoT is being put in clothing. Michael Kors purses are including IoT. Refrigerators are going to store your passwords on certain things. Your washing machine, which orders laundry detergent automatically from Amazon, has got your password. And the biggest nightmare of all is if you're using your car and you're putting your password or your credit card into it for Sirius XM or any other digital streaming service.
That's right.
It's now in your car.
Yep.
Tires. So we
absolutely.
We talked to the folks at Tire Hub last week, and they are going to start chipping,
very cool.
Essentially chipping tires to help fleets predict when those tires need to be replaced, refurbished, retreaded, whatever.
Hey,
so
by the way,
it's going to be in everything.
One more thing, Scott, and Tony mentioned it. When we think about the market and market segmentation and the price of the brand. Actually, circular opens up a lot more flexible brand segmentation. Here's what I mean. Let's say that you have a very large company, one of the big box stores or something like that wants to buy Cisco or something. We can't equal their price point because that would degrade the price of the marketplace. But we go to them and we say, hey, I will give you this certified pre-owned CPO. I will give it to you at the price point you're looking for. Maybe you can even blend it with your new. I'll give you the exact same warranty, etc. Now you've allowed the market to hit their price point but not degrade your standard new product price. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
So you can really benefit your own brand and hold your ASPs up if you can do that effectively. Right?
And Jack, of course, that is easier now with e-commerce because you don't have to stack the boxes up in a retail store where pretty colors are very important.
Yep. Everything comes in a brown box.
Everything comes in a brown box, and you're pitching it with the exact same photos and information as the new product. So it's a nice trade-off to expand the marketplace that Jack said.
Yep.
Well, it's not just technology. I mean, there are lots of products that can be repurposed, reused, refurbished, right?
Totally.
Or reconstituted into something else.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
All right, let's switch gears over to design for CE. And we've kind of alluded a couple times, different components of the conversation. But when I saw this phrase, as one of the things that we wanted to speak to, I immediately thought more of the new product development, design for CE. And I know that's not 100% of the story, but Jack, how do you begin to talk about design for CE when it comes to Cisco's approach to the circular economy? Yeah,
so there really are two components, probably three components actually, Scott. There is the new product from scratch. I'm going to design it so that it's more circular. And circular doesn't only mean things like modularity, like I could take the old technology out, put the new technology in, still use the chassis, et cetera, et cetera. It also means things like, can I make it weigh less, right? So one of the things I'm asking the guys to do is, hey, we have all this steel. Do we need that much steel? You guys probably know you can make an airplane beam more strong by cutting holes in it, right? Why can't we do that everywhere? Things like, can I do a better job of getting rid of things like foam, et cetera, et cetera. So there's the new product piece. There is the retrofit piece of what's going on and what's in the marketplace right now. So are there ways to upgrade and to make more intelligent, or actually change the products that have been in the market for a while as they go out? But then the third piece that I would say is the best practices. So once we learn, can we make everything exactly the same so each new product is not a one-off? My team runs packaging engineering. We do a lot of stuff in packaging engineering. We're doing a lot of best practice stuff. I'll give you a couple of pretty good examples. I got a battery charger, for a car the other day. Great. It came with a UK power cord, a Chinese power cord, Australian power cord. There were probably 6 power cords in the thing. I only need one. I don't need the US one. So one concept that we're playing with is it's a balancing act, but we don't want our customers to have a bad experience, but we don't want them to get bins and bins and bins of stuff that they can't use. And so we're actually looking at making accessories more optional than mandatory, right? That is a best practice. Once we succeed at that, we will want to do that everywhere, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's especially with e-commerce, that's relatively easy to detect, right? You say, okay, you're landed and you're ordering from the United States of America, so you could default to that, and then if somebody needs it for travel purposes, let's say, you could make that the option.
Right. Exactly. Yep.
Now, the coolest part about being in reverse logistics, and this is truly the coolest part, is we see this stuff.
Yeah.
The engineers designing it at the beginning don't see it. They don't think about it. So one of the most important aspects of being in reverse logistics is having strong influencing skills like Jack. I mean, you have to be able to stand in front of the CFO, you have to be able to stand in front of the head of engineering and design and say, that's a stupid design, it's going to fail. And you got to find a better way to say it than I just did, which Jack clearly knows.
That's why Jack does it.
That's why Jack does it. I was, okay. And the other aspect of it that we kid about, but it's important, is your job is to work yourself out of a job.
Yeah.
Figure out how to stop that flow of things making people unhappy that they decide to send it back.
Right.
So it's an intense, ongoing challenge that will never end. But we win little battles here and there, like Jack said, on the packaging side. You get a second chance.
Tony, all joking aside about standing in front of the CFO, I have no doubt you could do it diplomatically. But is there
that's the buzz of Supply Chain City.
That's
the activity in the background.
People are dying to get
our
in
listeners
here.
are hearing.
So is there sorry, I'm just waiting for them to get here so they can hear me as well. Do you see that there's more consciousness of companies towards brand equity that allows them to look at the value of brand and the perception of the consumer rather than just look at the bottom line dollars when you say drill some extra holes or make this out of aluminum instead of steel or whatever?
There's a battle going on in the marketplace. And I know that Jack, even in the B2B area, is well aware of it. You do have a brand to protect.
Yeah.
If you want to protect your brand, you are going to take everything back from everyone you sell it to. And that's what Apple's stated purpose is now, and Cisco has stated that as a purpose. But you think of all the companies that are out there that are now saying, no, just give us an allowance.
Yes.
And instead of taking it back, we'll get rid of it for you. Well, that's not a good move necessarily. So the CFO, though, is the person who says, you know what, that's a steady, even number month after month. I like that. Let's go for the allowance instead of taking it back and protecting the brand. Or you've got the other brand protection craziness that happens. Louis Vuitton, we've mentioned this before. They take the purses back and they burn them because they don't want them in the secondary market. They've got enough trouble with counterfeiting and everything else. They think that's the smart approach.
I think they're changing those companies are beginning to change their tune, but you're right, that happens all the time. And I'll tell you, having been a retail merchandiser, I have had those discussions. It was 20 odd years ago, but I've had those discussions with vendors because the cost of returning goods back to the vendor for them to verify that it's junk and defective is far higher than the cost of simply absorbing it and throwing it in the garbage. So, in large part, retailers as we all know, started this because we went to the vendors and said, just give us an allowance. We don't want to send it back to you. It's too expensive for both of us to do that.
Right.
So,
Jack, you were going to add some comments to, I think, what Tony was sharing earlier.
Yeah, one of the things I think is also important to pay attention to is, can we, whether it's a high-tech part or a relatively low-tech part of car alternator or something like that, can we start to acquire data, like you guys were talking about, everything being chipped, so that we know better when the part is getting sick instead of just automatically replacing it? Like, you know, my friends at Georgia Tech have calculated if you actually take the delta between when it really needs to be replaced before the factory shuts down, which is would be really bad, and when the PM table says it should be replaced, there's a lot of value in that space. Yep. So even though that's not part of circular design, it actually, in my mind, is part of circular design. How do you get the telemetry and the IoT to tell you when something is getting sick, right?
Yep. So we've hit IoT and blockchain.
That's right.
All we need, a little bit of AI.
We
might as well throw it out there.
Supply chain technology, alphabet soup.
But that's a good point. I mean, look, factories and in the automotive trade, one of the industries that I come from, that's something that has been a big part of the industry for a long, long time. I mean, remanufacturing is what we called it in automotive, is standard practice for starters and alternators and whatever else. Yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. And the reason for that is because the economics make sense. And I wonder, have you all seen a change in the marketplace that makes people conscious of how to make the economics make sense? Because look, let's face it, in the end, if we include brand equity as part of it, though, as you said, Tony, that's a very difficult sell, the economics have to make sense to motivate companies to do the right thing here. So where are we there?
Well, the economics will always make sense if they get caught doing the bad thing. And then they lose credibility, their brand recognition goes in the toilet. It's very hard to recover once you've been caught shipping things across the world that go into landfills or that go into countries where it becomes hazardous materials, or where you burn clothing instead of donating it to people who are homeless and need it. I mean, there's so many ways. And if an organization ignores that risk factor, then it's going to bite them hard. But if an organization looks at that and says, you know what, maybe it's slightly more expensive to take the goods back and donate them rather than throw them away, that's the right thing to do. And so there's actually companies now, and again, Amazon is one of them and others, that are saying, you know what, H&M retailer, we should not burn that stuff again. Let's find a way to do something right with it. And that's important, because clothing is the example, and apparel, other industries. It's not worth it to take it back cost-wise, but it's worth it to protect your brand and to do a secondary market value. You look like you're doing something good for the economy, for people, for the planet, and it's a win-win. If it's hard to substantiate that to a CFO, and Jack and I have both been in front of CFOs where it's hard to explain that, but eventually when something goes wrong, then you've got the basis to explain, well, we can avoid that cost.
All right, so let's keep moving beyond design for CE, because I want to talk about, Cisco has been recognized by a variety of organizations for the company's approach to sustainability. And CDP and Barron's amongst them more recently. Jack, what are some of the common threads that you've seen in this recognition from these third parties when it comes to Cisco's approach to sustainability?
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't know whether we are ahead or behind of Amazon and Apple in this one. I'm pretty sure we're ahead, but I hate to say that. Our CEO at Davos, I think 2 years ago, made a pledge to the entire world that said, hey, any customer who asks, we're going to take 100% of what they want back. Not only that, but we're going to try and develop new economic models that allow us to monetize these kinds of things and allow the economics to make sense. Number 3, we're going to create new kinds of business like the sharing economy that will allow those returned assets to be useful. And we're going to do all this for the entire customer base, but also the world, right? So So he made that pitch. We see those threads, the thread of the new technology, new business models, the thread of the return product, the thread of new methods of monetization go through almost everything that we do. And it's really pretty exciting. I am kind of an unrepentant capitalist. I do things for money. I think making money.
You heathen.
I think making money is a good thing. Does. And one of the nice things about circular economy and sustainability is, I swear to you, I have yet to find a scenario where, with the proper look at where the real costs are, you can't do good by doing well, right? And let's take, some people would call it a circular concept, some people would call it pure sustainability. The whole greenhouse gas thing, we took 1 million pounds of carbon out of the air. We beat our goal by a year. We were done in 2019 instead of 2020. We're about 15% ahead right now. And Scott, it saved me millions and millions of dollars. Why? Because it's much more expensive to have tons of gear flying through the air than it is on the water, So, I think that at the base of those three concepts is a fundamental CFO concept. There's money there. That's a good thing.
That's a great thing.
Yeah. That helps. That helps to rationalize, just from a strict, bottom line standpoint, why we're after the CE and sustainability plays, because it not only it serves every shareholder, right? Everyone wins here. Okay, so I want to switch over as we're starting to wrap up this interview here. Talking with Jack Allen, Cisco, and Tony Sciarrotta with the Reverse Logistics Association. Before we switch gears and talk about RLA and the and just the RLA State of the Union and a quick update on Conference and Expo, Jack, what else? For companies out there, regardless of size, that are starting their own internal circular economy or sustainability discussions. What's important for them to keep in mind as a plan of an effective and a practical and a successful approach?
Yeah, so I think you touched on a couple of key things, and they tie into what we were talking about just a minute ago, which is, and I'm sure there are people who may be mildly upset by me saying this, but actually you can't just go down the altruistic path. What I've found through my history is that if it's pure altruism, after a while somebody says, not worth doing, we've got other priorities, let's work on that. Whereas if you can say, hey, I'm developing a hard-nosed business case why this is a good thing, and by the way, it's good for the planet, it's good for the brand, it's good for the employees, etc. Now you have quadruple plays, right? So I think it's important to recognize that. I do think it's very important to recognize, especially a lot of these younger kids that are coming out of school, they truly believe in this. And so your odds at attracting you're in the talent business, Scott, your odds of attracting a better talent base because you're focusing on this are much higher if you spend time and money on it. I do think that you have to pay attention to the economics, the business value, but also not be bound by the past. If you think about my early days in manufacturing, we all thought it made sense to build 1,000 widgets and send it into stock and then pull it back out and build it a little more and send it back because that was economics of scale, right? Then the Japanese came in and they said, that's stupid, right? It's a dumb thing to do. Fundamentally, I think that the economics of circular economy and the CFO view have not quite matured enough so that we actually capture all those costs effectively. So I do think you have to have an open mind about what is the real value and how does the real value accrue to my shareholders and my employees and my corporation, right? Those would probably be the biggies.
Yeah.
Enlightened SelfInterest.
That's right, exactly.
Adam Smith has had a great
the
theory
invisible
on
hand, yes.
Right. The benevolence, right? It's not from the benevolence of the butcher somehow that we expect our dinner, right?
Yep. I'm with you.
So,
Greg, we didn't get your AI worked in there very well, though. Let's
that was artificial intelligence right there.
The artificial. You do know that it's employed now in the return world, as a grading process.
Heavily.
So that it can now measure scratches and torn materials, and so it's being used because that's a repetitive task that it can do.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's that CPO thing that is connected to AI.
Yeah.
If you want to throw people into acronym hell right now.
Yeah, right.
Both AI and ML, Greg. So you really got everything.
Man,
you know?
yeah, that's right. You have
You
to
got the
mention both now.
trifecta.
Right.
Also, last week, speaking of blockchain, DHL and hey, I'm all about the.
That was totally circular right there.
Yes, practical. Coming back to where
Circular
we started.
discussion. We're circular on everything.
That's right. DHL and HP, Hewlett-Packard, talked about this blockchain project they've been driving since July to handle one-off shipments outside of the logistics contract, the standard contract. And had some big bottom line returns, 100% accuracy in terms of invoicing. And then I think one of the second two other big benefits, number 2, was getting their suppliers paid, per the contract versus, the one-offs, and they go down the rabbit trail and add a lot of time to the collection periods. And number 3 was the amount of time it saved both parties, DHL and HP, in the manual processing, the manual conversations to make it happen and get paid. So big wins, big gains thus far. And, regardless, with any of these acronyms we're talking about here, I love the practical use cases and the practical applications, which I think helps any listener or any supply chain professional to wrap their head around the benefit beyond the buzzword.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so Tony, as we wrap up here, and Jack Allen, thank you very much. Don't go anywhere, but thanks for your thoughts and insights here today. Always fascinating to reconnect with you. All right, so Tony, the hits keep on coming also with the RLA. Y'all are on the move. We are excited about the Reverse Logistics Conference, or the RLA Conference Expo in February. But tell us what's new. I know we've got some new keynotes for that event, but in general, what else is new with the RLA?
Well, what's new is we're adding a lot of retailers. And the reason is that the manufacturers and the retailers are the ones who live with the returns problems. They have to deal with reverse logistics, and they're looking for these solutions providers that can find new ways to make things move and work and refurbish and so on better. But a lot of manufacturers, as we mentioned, are putting it in the laps of the retailers to figure out what to do with it. I'm not necessarily saying that's a good or a bad idea, but it's out there. It exists. So we'll see more retailers in Las Vegas in February. There's a lot of buzz already. We've got some global companies such as Teleplan and XPOs of the world that are participating already. We have an excellent keynote speaker with John Gold. Jonathan Gold is Vice President of the National Retail Federation. And he'll be talking about, he's on the supply chain side, but he's going to be talking about the economy and the tariffs and the impacts of what's going on there. We always love having Steve Koenig. He'll be there as day 2 keynote, giving a little review of the CES show, Consumer Electronics Show, the month before. And Steve always adds his little touch about, we're going to see a lot of these in the next year coming back to people in this room. So he does his little spin. We've got some exciting events ahead of the show, ahead of the conference, such as a Women in Reverse Logistics luncheon. We've got a retailer reception, and we have a charity golf outing that we're going to put together, kind of a top golf thing with the opportunity to play golf with members of the board. So we're going to
How's Jack's golf game?
I've never played golf in my life.
Really?
To be honest with you, never.
You want to play for money?
Top tip shape.
I'll play poker with you, though.
When we have, of course, the excitement of the Expo Hall with the Supply Chain Now radio booth that we'll have there, lots of interviews, lots of opportunities to talk to industry thought leaders and get some views out on the podcasts and on the radio. So a lot of good things are happening. The Mirage is a fabulous venue. They're working with us very hard to make this even better this year in their grand ballroom as opposed to the back halls. So it's really exciting. There's a lot of excitement, enthusiasm for it. It's exciting to get emails and phone calls from people saying, hey, you haven't called us yet. We're ready to do something. So that's very exciting.
So, Jack, we're happy to play Limit Texas Hold'em with you.
All right.
In terms of very small limits. I'm a big spender, maybe max buck bet. But looking forward to a great event. And all of our listeners can learn more at rla.org to find all the details, not just on the event itself, but all the events that Tony was alluding to earlier, global organization and global content. Okay, so I've already answered your question here because we're going to finish up with how can our listeners find out more. So, Jack, how can folks tune into what Cisco is doing and you?
Yeah, actually, if you Google Cisco Circular Economy, you will come up with so much content that it'll take you a month to read.
You might actually go to the second page of Google.
Yeah, you'll get videos, you'll get papers, you'll get all kinds of stuff. So, so that's probably the best way, right?
Okay.
By the way, relative to the conference, I do want to say that it's really a fabulous conference. It's great to go to. And my aspiration for Tony is if we can get 25,000 hackers at a Black Hat conference, we should be able to get 10,000 people who are passionate about circular economy come to the RLA conference.
I'm with you.
We will.
It's going to happen.
Yep.
It is. This is too big of an issue for it not to.
Yep, I'm with you. All right, so Tony, how can folks connect with you?
Go to the website, rla.org, and underneath the About is the advisory board with pictures and a little bit of information, as well as the entire management team. And we are global. We've got management team in Europe and in Asia and spread across North America. There's a picture of me there, so you can find me on the street if you really need to. But there's also contact information.
More likely in a convention hall, but
outstanding.
Yeah.
Might be there. So rla.org, that's our key.
Perfect. Thanks so much, Jack Allen, Senior Director, Global Logistics with Cisco, Tony Sciarrotta, Executive Director with the Reverse Logistics Association. Pleasure to reconnect and look forward to connecting again here real soon. Great conversation.
Yeah, I love the insights. This is a great topic. I've been there. I've felt it. I'm the sinner converted. I mean, I've been right. I was part of the problem at one point. I'm glad to be part of the solution. Anyone
keep baptizing folks.
Yeah, that's right.
No, what's the word I want to use? Been there, done that. With each of these reverse logistics installments, no one is reading talking points. It's really coming from the trenches, coming from what they're out there leading and doing. And oftentimes, tip of the spear. Companies such as Cisco that, they're not following anybody, right? And that's what I enjoy the most about these. And I think this is our third or fourth month.
Number four.
And, of course, this is going to culminate with lots and lots of interviews and podcasts out in Vegas in February 2020. So hopefully folks will check out RLA and enjoy it and interact as much and engage as much as we've enjoyed doing the same, right?
Yep.
Okay. So on that note, we're going to wrap up on just a couple of quick announcements. We've already tackled the RLA event in February, but right before that, we're going to be partnering with the CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable in January.
Yeah.
Do you remember what the topic's going to be?
Not at all.
Okay.
No.
So
you take that one.
NASTRAC, which I know you all are familiar with. One of their leaders is going to be coming out and sharing some of the regulations and how they're impacting the transportation industry at this CSCMP Atlanta Roundtable Luncheon in January 2019. You can learn more about that at atlantacscmp.org. And then
I think we're getting close enough, so let's re-mention RLA and the dates there. We've been kind of rolling. Hey, flip the calendar to 2020, but we're getting close enough that people need to start planning travel and whatnot.
Right, that is true. And the dates, 5th, 6th, and 7th?
No, 4, 5, 6.
Okay.
Tuesday.
Don't get people to show up a day late.
Just Tuesday after Super Bowl. That's all you got to remember.
Tuesday after Super Bowl.
Recover from Super Bowl on Monday and fly out to Vegas and
go to Vegas and bet on the Super Bowl. Then just show up the next day.
Yes, I like that. February 4th, 5th, and 6th, 2020, out in Vegas at the Mirage.
At the Mirage.
Right, RLA.org. And then Modex, next month, not only are we broadcasting throughout the 4 days, they're hosting the 2020 Atlanta Supply Chain Awards, which we are pleased to
including
the RLA.
Yeah.
Reverse Logistics Award.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Which we shamelessly stole most of the criteria from the RLA's own awards. And of course, I'm kidding a little bit, but, with these award shows, it's always great to imitate the best.
Yep.
So, and Tony, I think you gave us our permission to do so. But new award this year. So the first year Atlanta Supply Chain Awards was this past March.
Yep.
Coming up at MODEX 2020 will be the second year. We're going a little bit bigger, a lot better. And one of the reasons is because we're adding new awards that we got a lot of feedback around, including this Reverse Logistics Award, which we're pleased to be partnering with RLA on, which they'll be presenting it at
and judging
the lunch.
Right?
And
Tony himself will present it, because that in and of itself is worth starting an initiative.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Tony and his entourage. Yes, absolutely. So MODEX is free to attend. That's really important because that's a huge networking, best practice learning, market intel gathering. 35,000 of your closest supply chain friends should be there here in Atlanta. MODEXshow.com to register. And then the Atlanta Supply Chain Awards isn't free to attend. A lot of our proceeds are going to benefit the three nonprofits.
That's because we're serving lunch.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So you got to.
Well, we're also, just like we did last year, a lot of our proceeds are going to benefit the three nonprofits involved. CSEMP Atlanta, Apex Atlanta. I think the chamber is either a nonprofit or not-for-profit. But regardless, lots of scholarships are being driven by our efforts there. And URL is AtlantaSupplyChainAwards.com. Okay, do we leave anything out today?
Well done, lad.
I guess our specialist upstairs took a lemonade break. I don't know. All right.
Just in time for the show to be over.
Yes. Really appreciate.
But seriously, a great example of the circular economy. This building, formerly a plant, a factory.
Yes, a factory.
Right. Then a live and work space, now a business space. And I am sure that what they're doing is putting a new roof on this 130-year-old building. So,
to our listeners that might have heard some of the work being done at a couple spots during the podcast, we are living and breathing in an example of the circular economy and repurposing. And you know what? To be fair, I'd rather put up with that and enjoy the character that's in this architecture and reusing it, right? Rather than raising the whole building and put up one of the ugly concrete cinder block buildings
that's going up next door.
We're going to get in trouble with somebody. Man. I don't know. But
getting in trouble, that's my job.
That's right. Big thanks to our guests here today on Supply Chain Now Radio. We've had a great day. Jack Allen with Cisco, Tony Sciarrotta with the Reverse Logistics Association. To our listeners, be sure to check out other upcoming events, replays of our interviews, other resources at supplychainnowradio.com. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, including Greg's favorite, YouTube.
Yes.
Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. On behalf of the entire Supply Chain Now Radio team, this is Scott Luton wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.